Italy. It's a beautiful place of art, history, philosophy, and invention. It gave the world pizza, pasta, ravioli, calzones, gelato, lasagna. Mamma mia, I'm getting hungry. Gosh dang. It was also the home of the Renaissance, which birthed some of the most prolific figures in world history. Unfortunately, it was a country that was defined by violence as well. As far back as the infamous Roman Empire, which gave us the insane Emperor Nero and the crucifixion practice, to the Napoleonic Wars, to as recent as World War II, Italy has been subjugated to conflict and death. Probably to a greater extent to your average country. It doesn't help that most of its lifespan has seen it fractured into rival states under the control of different houses. During the 19th century, a campaign would start to finally unite the country of Italy for good. Many artists and authors would emerge from the war front as this long and bloody conflict went on. One of those was a man named Carlo Collodi. Born November 24th, 1826 to a seamstress, Carlo would spend his early life in his mother's hometown of Collodi, which he would later adopt as his penned surname, until he left to attend a seminary school before dropping out and working in a bookstore. When the Italian Wars for Independence kicked up, Carlo volunteered to fight in the Tuscan army and would become enamored with Italian politics, creating a couple of satirical newspapers that made fun of current events. Now, with politics being what it is, a toxic cesspool of narcissistic bad actors that destroy good people to get ahead, Carlo naturally became disenchanted with that world and turned to children's books. Here he would write his most prolific work that would survive the ages, The Adventures of Pinocchio. This little chapter book about a wooden puppet who learns life lessons as he treats everyone around him like garbage was a massive hit with the masses, and the popularity would not wane as Italy continued its years of conflict. As the world healed from the war to end all wars, this silly little book found its way into the hands of Walt Disney as he worked on his first feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. According to animator Norman Ferguson, the guy who gave his boss the book, Walt busted his guts with enthusiasm. An adaptation of the books would quickly be commissioned, though Walt would reject the initial story outline for being too faithful. Which, yikes, that's usually not a good sign, is it? It's a shame that's the only mindset Disney seems to carry on from its early days, and look how well that's turning out for them. Eventually, however, production of Pinocchio would be on its way. While initially slated to be Disney's third animated feature film, it was moved up the queue due to complications in the production of Bambi, which I'll talk about when I get to that movie. Upon its initial release on February 23, 1940, Pinocchio was a financial bomb, barely recouping half of its negative cost. However, that really isn't the fault of the Disney company, because the European and Asian markets were cut off thanks to a little war with a funny mustache man. Thankfully, the movie was able to turn a profit upon its multiple theatrical re-releases, currently sitting at a worldwide lifetime gross of $121,892,045. Since its original debut, Pinocchio was hailed as a masterpiece, being praised as a massive step up in quality from Disney's first feature. Let's see if it lives up to that praise, and while we're at it, let's look at the lessons and the values that shape this film's worldview. This is Pinocchio. Much like Snow White, we open on a storybook, except this time we're greeted by Jiminy Cricket singing the song When You Wish Upon a Star. This song was performed by Jiminy's voice actor, Cliff Edwards, who is a popular recording artist before being cast in this movie. When You Wish Upon a Star would become a very popular song, becoming a theme song of sorts for the Disney company. In the 1980s, it would accompany the Disney logo at the beginning of their movies, much like how As Time Goes By from Casablanca became the signature tune for Warner Brothers. It's a whimsical little song that sets up one of the main messages in this movie, which I'll get to once we actually get through the actual plot. Jiminy finally stops his little serenade to address the audience. He tells us that he used to not believe in the message of the song he was singing, but something happened to him to change his mind. He opens the storybook to tell us how that happened. Thankfully, it's a picture book this time around, so I don't have to read. A long time ago, Jiminy stumbled upon the home of a woodcarver named Geppetto. At this point in time, Jiminy is a homeless vagrant, so he decides to commit some home invasion to find a place to sleep for the night. As Jiminy warms himself, he notices a curious puppet on Geppetto's desk. Geppetto comes in with his cat Figaro to finish painting the puppet, causing Jiminy to run and hide. Fun fact, Geppetto was actually modeled off of his voice actor Christian Rubb. Also, there's a fish here now, too. Don't know where she came from, because if she was in the room this whole time, you'd think she would have spotted Jiminy and his cover would be blown, but whatever.
Smash.
Geppetto finishes his little puppet and starts dancing around with it. It's a nice little scene that characterizes Geppetto quite well. He's very loving with Figaro and his goldfish Cleo, but he isn't above engaging in some mischief either. Suddenly all of Geppetto's clocks start going off to signal it's time for bed. There's a lot of neat designs Geppetto has here. You got a bee coming out of a flower, a mama bird and her chicks, a guy trying to chop off a turkey's head, a hunter trying to shoot a bird, a drunk guy hanging out of a window, and a child getting his bare butt whooped. Okay, Geppetto, you may have some violence issues you need to work out. Well, it turns out it's 9 o'clock, which to people who aren't in school anymore means it's time to sleep. Man, I miss the days where I could just stay up till 2 in the morning, gosh.
My little water baby.
Okay, they're doing this on purpose, aren't they? Geppetto prevents Figaro from sleeping by fantasizing about Pinocchio being a real boy. Figaro's sleep is further impeded upon when Geppetto realizes he forgot to open the window. After Figaro risks his life to get this task done, Geppetto spots the wishing star and wishes for Pinocchio to be a real boy.
Figaro, you know what I wished?
No, Geppetto, you're not allowed to tell people what you wished for or else it won't come true. Them's the rules. They finally settle in for the night, and now it's Jiminy who can't get sleep thanks to Geppetto's clocks and his snoring. Well, that definitely woke Geppetto up, right? I mean, that was really, really loud. I mean, I guess it doesn't. It stops him from snoring, so that means he heard Jiminy, but I guess he just didn't feel like waking up at the time. Suddenly, the wishing star descends from the heavens to eradicate all life on Earth. Okay, it's actually the Blue Fairy who decides to grant life to Pinocchio. She tells him that Geppetto wishes that he be a real boy, but in order for that to happen, Pinocchio needs to prove himself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. Gosh dang, woman, let the kid adjust to sudden consciousness before you start piling on all this responsibility. But honestly, I blame Geppetto. This is what he gets for telling someone his wish. If he just kept that crap to himself, Pinocchio would just be born as a normal boy. But no, he's got to go through all this childhood trauma so he can become a real boy to please his father. That's on you, Geppetto. That's on you. See, that's why I never told anyone that I once wished upon a star to get 1 million subscribers. Ah, dang it. Back to the movie. Pinocchio needs a conscience, and Jiminy hops in to volunteer, well, because, a woman asked him to. The Blue Fairy upgrades his threads and appoints him Pinocchio's conscience. He asks for a badge, and the Blue Fairy promises him a gold one day. She then leaves, telling Pinocchio to be a good boy and let his conscience be his guide. Well, Jiminy does his best.
Now you see, the world is full of temptations.
Alright, good start.
They're the wrong things that seem right at the time. But even though the right things may seem wrong sometimes the wrong things may be right at the wrong time, or vice versa.
Okay, I feel like it's getting a little more complicated.
Understand?
Yeah, me neither, Pinocchio. Jiminy tries a different approach via song. He tells Pinocchio to give him a whistle whenever the puppet finds himself in trouble.
Pucker up and blow.
I mean, the song is a bit of a silly one that's packed to the brim with gags and not much else, as it reiterates what the Blue Fairy told Pinocchio just a few seconds ago. However, it does get Pinocchio a bit overexcited, causing him to stumble off the desk and wake Geppetto. Yeah, because that's what's gonna wake you up, and not the freaking talking crickets screaming at you, but hey, who am I to judge sleep patterns? I could sleep through a tornado tearing my house apart, but if my phone buzzes just once, I'm up and at 'em, Jiminy cheeses it to let Pinocchio get caught all by himself. Some conscience you turned out to be. Geppetto can't believe his puppet is talking, so he splashes his face to make sure he's awake. He realizes this isn't a dream and is excited that Pinocchio will one day be a real boy. His puppet son gets acquainted with Figaro and Cleo, who instantly befriend him. Okay, this is the second Disney movie in a row that has an animal kiss a person. Walter Elias Disney, you got some explaining to do, man. We get another celebratory dance from Geppetto, but it ends abruptly when Pinocchio accidentally sets his finger on fire. Geppetto puts it out in Cleo's bowl, ending their celebration. Geppetto makes a second attempt at going to bed. He tells Pinocchio that he has to sleep so he can go to school tomorrow. Yeah, don't you have to register for that? What are the teachers going to think when some random talking puppet shows up for class? I think there's some proper channels you have to go through to make this official, Geppetto. I'm not an expert at the time period this takes place in, so maybe back then you just have a kid and you just go, alright, see ya, go to school, and the teacher's just like, we got one more kid, let's go, let's have class. I don't know, maybe that's the times. The next morning, Geppetto sends Pinocchio off to the school he didn't register for with a staff who aren't aware he's coming. As the kids make their way to said school, they are watched by a lame fox named Honest John and a mute cat named Gideon. Gideon was originally voiced by voice acting legend Mel Blanc, surprisingly his only ever voice acting role for Disney, but the decision was made to make the cat mute, getting rid of all Mel's lines except for a hiccup that was repeated a couple times. Okay, maybe I don't blame Mel for not coming back to the Disney company. Anyway, as he mocks these kids, Honest John spots a poster for Stromboli's marionette show. He reminisces about the time he passed Gideon off as a puppet and sold him to the fat puppeteer before the shifty pair bump into Pinocchio. John thinks they could make a fortune selling the living puppet to Stromboli. They intercept Pinocchio before he can reach school. Honest John works his slick words on the boy while Gideon does his best to ruin John's scam. I like the little detail where John holds the book upside down while pretending to read it. He may be street smart, but he lacks an education. He also can't spell Pinocchio.
P-I-N-U-O-P-I...
The crafty fox convinces Pinocchio to become an actor with a little song.
An actor's life is gay.
Well, nowadays that takes a brand new meaning. Jiminy bumps into the trio after waking up late. You're really not doing that good of a job at being a conscience. Gotta step it up, bud. He gets Pinocchio's attention and, unfortunately, Gideon's as well. After the cat fails to assassinate the cricket, hitting John instead, Jiminy talks with Pinocchio, and he's standing on a pitcher plant. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a biology lesson here. The rims of a pitcher plant are slippery when moistened by condensation or nectar, causing their insect prey to fall in where it's digested. So unless this is an unusually dry day, Jimmy's dead. He's dead. He died here. Anyway, Jiminy tells Pinocchio to politely refuse the acting offer, the responsible thing to say to any child. Pinocchio agrees to this plan, but immediately forgets it when Honest John comes calling. And now Jiminy is hiding inside of the pitcher plant. If this wasn't a kids movie, this is what would have happened to Jiminy. Instead, Jiminy hops out to get Geppetto, but changes his mind to chase after Pinocchio. That night, Stromboli presents Pinocchio's show. I want to quickly shout out Bill Teitla, who was the primary animator on this pot-bellied puppet master. Stromboli is by far the most expressive character in the movie, and pairing the animation with the voice performance of Charles Judell's, he becomes a very memorable secondary antagonist. Anyway, Pinocchio starts to perform the song I've Got No Strings, obviously most famously used in that Age of Ultron trailer. It's a fun little show tune that basically takes some of Pinocchio's unique qualities and exploits them to make him a dancing monkey. It will later be sung multiple times by Stromboli, highlighting how this song isn't really a true expression of who Pinocchio is. Despite not having any strings, Pinocchio is still a puppet of Stromboli. We see Pinocchio stumble around the stage, not knowing what's going on as other puppets do a big performance. Once again, this emphasizes how little control Pinocchio has in this situation.
Smash. Look, it's got tits. It's jutting its tits out.
Pinocchio's improvised performance proves to be a success, which causes Jiminy to doubt his own advice, so he leaves Pinocchio to the limelight.
What does an actor want with a conscience anyway?
Back at Geppetto's shop, Geppetto decides to go out to look for Pinocchio, telling Figaro and Cleo that they don't get to eat anything until the puppet boy returns. Why is the goldfish eating cake for dinner? Get her some real food. Like steak. But that salmon do be looking frickin' delicious though, and I don't even like seafood. I mean, we give anime credit for making some delicious looking food in animation, but come on, that looks great. Back at Stromboli's, the fat man counts his coins while enjoying some fine dining. He generously gives Pinocchio a metal disc, which Pinocchio wants to go show his father. Stromboli doesn't like that and locks the puppet boy up in a cage, telling him that he plans to take him on a world tour until he grows old and worn, at which point he will become firewood.
That's a thick-ass boy! Damn!
Jiminy sees Stromboli's wagon leave town and decides to say goodbye to Pinocchio one last time. Inside, he finds his captive friend and makes a failed attempt to rescue the puppet boy. The two resign themselves to their fates, though I don't know why Jiminy won't just go get Geppetto now. I know he isn't a snitch or whatever, but this seems like the only option at this point. They even pass the woodcarver yelling for Pinocchio. Just get his attention and you're all good. Instead, they give up hope for rescue until the Blue Fairy descends from the heavens once again. She asks Pinocchio why he didn't go to school. Jiminy encourages him to tell the truth, but Pinocchio decides to lie. This causes his nose to grow. Despite this being an iconic part of his character, I was surprised to see that this is the only scene in which this happens in the movie. The Blue Fairy dispels some wisdom about lying on the puppet boy.
A lie keeps growing and growing until it's as plain as the nose on your face.
Jiminy convinces the fairy to forgive Pinocchio and help him escape just this once. And so the fairy gives the two one last chance to be good.
A boy who won't be good might just as well be made of wood.
Meanwhile, at a place called the Red Lobster Inn, Honest John and Gideon retell how they sold a child into slavery to a guy named the Coachman, who is also voiced by Charles Judels. As opposed to the over-the-top, almost comedic performance of Stromboli, the Coachman is a much more reserved and more sinister character. There's even a bit of animation that paints him in an almost demonic depiction. He proposes a get-rich plan to the mammalian duo.
I'm collecting stupid little boys.
Guys, I think we found Epstein's supplier. The Coachman says that he kidnaps boys that play hooky from school and misbehave and takes them to Pleasure Island, where they face a sinister fate. Honest John and Gideon are sent out to collect these stupid little boys. They find Pinocchio as he's rushing home to commit himself to schoolwork and being a good son. Honest John pulls a big pharma on him and gives Pinocchio a fake diagnosis in order to sell him something. But seriously, this is one of the funniest bits in the movie.
Oh, this makes it perfectly clear.
John sells Pinocchio on a relaxing vacation to Pleasure Island and takes him to the Coachman. Yet again, Jiminy finds himself behind the ball. On the way to the Coachman's boat, Pinocchio meets a degenerate named Lampwick who goes on to serve as a bad influence to the puppet boy on Pleasure Island. They have a good little interaction where Lampwick is imagining all the degeneracy he can get into on the island while Pinocchio is just innocently repeating that he got a card from Honest John. This is the best example of Pinocchio's characterization as a naive child being pushed and pulled by people who desperately want to control him for their own reasons. The boys arrive at Pleasure Island, which basically is a giant theme park. You can eat all the pies and ice cream you want, you can roughhouse, you can get free cigars, and you can destroy property without any repercussions. Sounds like a lot of fun. Unbeknownst to the boys, the Coachman has his shadowy slaves lock the doors to the island and get some crates ready. Sometime later, Pleasure Island has been turned into a wasteland. Jiminy, who has been scouring the island for Pinocchio, finally finds him in a pool house. The game, not the body of water. The Marionette and Lampwick are smoking, drinking, and playing pool. Jimmy berates Pinocchio's degeneracy.
Look at yourself. Smoking, playing pool. Ow!
Whoa, Jiminy, what's wrong with playing pool? I will not stand for pool slander in this household. You know what? Never mind. Lampwick teases Pinocchio for listening to a bug, and Jiminy attempts to start a bar fight with this kid. Pinocchio intervenes and stands up for Lampwick, so Jiminy decides to let the puppet boy lie in the bed he made. On his way off the island, the talking cricket finds the Coachman loading a bunch of donkeys on a boat. One of the donkeys starts talking, and Jiminy realizes that these donkeys used to be the degenerate boys who populated the island earlier, and that Pinocchio will soon join them. I don't know why exactly it takes so long for Pinocchio, and especially the extremely degenerate Lampwick, to anamorph, but it does start to happen to the duo soon. Lampwick is the first. What starts as a funny bit with Pinocchio's reaction quickly turns into a horrifying image of a little boy pleading for help until he completes his transformation into a donkey. The most terrifying part of this is hearing Lampwick's cry for his mother's morph into donkey brays. This is one of the most infamous moments in the movie, but it's an effective way to drill the message of this movie into the audience's head, especially a child. If you watched this movie growing up, I bet you steered clear of pool, didn't ya? Pinocchio starts to suffer the same fate, but Jiminy arrives just in time to lead the boy in an escape from the island. Back on the mainland, Pinocchio finds Geppetto's workshop abandoned. Not knowing where he's gone, Pinocchio and Jiminy sit at Geppetto's front door wondering where he's at. The Blue Fairy Ex Machinas herself into the situation to give the pair a letter that informs them that Geppetto got swallowed by a whale named Monstro. I mean, it's kind of lame that that happened off screen. I wish we could have seen that, but I guess the good news is that Geppetto is still alive inside the beast's belly. Pinocchio determines that he's going to rescue his father, and Jiminy decides to accompany him. Underwater, the two look for Geppetto for about 4 minutes. That really only serves to give us some goofs and gaffs that somewhat builds up the menace of Monstro, as every creature under the sea seems terrified of him. We then cut over to the big bad whale as he sleeps. Inside the guy's stomach, Geppetto and Figaro fish for dinner. Unfortunately, they are plumb out of luck. Well, that is until Monstro is woken up by a school of tuna. Not one to waste an opportunity, Geppetto gets to work stealing this guy's dinner. Pinocchio gets caught up in the school swarm and is swallowed. Inside, Geppetto reels him in and has a heartwarming reunion with his son. This movie has a really weird obsession with making out with fish. Geppetto is so ecstatic to see his son that he doesn't even really care about his, donkey parts. Pinocchio then gets an idea to light a fire and make Monstro sneeze, which will allow them to escape. I kind of wish this was properly set up, since this is played as an aha moment, but there's really nothing leading up to this moment that would allow Pinocchio to be the only person to come up with this idea. Why is it Pinocchio who specifically comes up with this idea to save the day? Why didn't Geppetto think of it? Regardless, the idea works, allowing the family to escape the belly of the whale. However, Monstro is pissed about the belly fire, so he comes after them with murderous intent. He destroys their raft, causing Geppetto to lose consciousness. Pinocchio saves his father and manages to slip into a cave as Monstro makes his final attack. Geppetto washes up on shore alive. Oh, and there's Figaro and Cleo. Don't know where they were the rest of the attack. They kind of just disappeared after the raft got destroyed and then just show up here. Alright, sure, I'll roll with that. Unfortunately, Pinocchio becomes a casualty of this conflict. So, just like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the main character is killed, and as everyone grieves their loss, they are resurrected. Don't worry though, no one's kissing Pinocchio in this. The Blue Fairy rewards Pinocchio's sacrifice by making him a real boy. The movie ends with Pinocchio celebrating with his family, and Jiminy is rewarded with his solid gold badge. Okay, seriously, why is everyone making out with fish in this movie? Overall, I do think this is a step up from Disney's first venture. The animation is absolutely gorgeous. You got the horrific donkey transformation, the terrifying Monstro, Pinocchio's wonderfully choreographed performance, the nice little detail of the Blue Fairy's translucent dress, look how gorgeous the water is! The cast as a whole is better defined than Snow White's as well. Pinocchio is our second naive Disney protagonist, but this time around Pinocchio's naivety comes as a major handicap for him. He's taken advantage of, sold false dreams, gives in to peer pressure, and other such childlike behavior. Of course, that's kind of the point of the story. He gets two mentor archetypes in this movie to help guide him. Geppetto is a warm man who loves his family, but is also a bit of a silly goose, not above pestering those he loves. He also doesn't seem to be the most responsible person, sending Pinocchio off by himself to school and taking his cat and fish out to sea to get swallowed by a whale. Meanwhile, Jiminy Cricket is a down-on-his-luck guy trying to get by in life. He starts the movie as a homeless vagrant looking for a place to sleep, and there are some implications throughout the movie that he may have had run-ins with the law.
Please, Your Honor. Miss Fairy?
Which would explain why he constantly hides from the other characters. He also seems to have a thing for the ladies. So make of that what you will. I like how Pinocchio's mentors are portrayed as people who still don't have life figured out. Sure, they're ahead of the curve compared to Pinocchio, but they still behave like children sometimes and have their own vices. It's a good illustration to children that their parents aren't going to be perfect, but as long as they strive to be good, they are still worthy people to follow and obey. Honest John and Gideon are foils to Jiminy in that they are also homeless vagrants vying for influence over Pinocchio. Instead of having noble intentions, they seek to take advantage of the boy to line their own pockets. And while I do think it's a bit silly that no one in this world populated by humans noticed that there is a humanoid fox and cat walking around, I think their anthropomorphization raises some interesting implications. The coachman says that the boys who go to Pleasure Island don't come back as boys, and while the trip we see in the movie turns the boys boys into donkeys, I think it's entirely possible that they could have turned into different animals. Ergo, I think it's possible that both John and Gideon were once victims of Pleasure Island. Oh shoot, maybe even Jiminy was too. I mean, he is an anthro cricket. But while he decides to seek redemption, John and Gideon choose to continue down their paths of villainy and work for the guy who made them this way. Speaking of which, the coachman is a close equivalent to Satan in this movie. I mean, yeah, I'm really going off of his dark minions and this frame, but I think it works within the context of the story. In the Christian canon, Lucifer is known as the ultimate tempter, and the coachman serves the same role for Pinocchio. He brings the puppet to Pleasure Island, where Pinocchio faces all sorts of temptations that promise a good time, but ultimately they make him a literal jackass, bringing about his effective destruction. Now, Stromboli, on the other hand, is a lot more straightforward. He's a greedy manager who seeks to exploit the adolescent Pinocchio for his own profit. Now, I can't imagine what that may be reminding you of. Lampwick serves as an example for kids that even their own peers can lead them astray. Lampwick lives a YOLO lifestyle,
Lampwick says a guy only lives once.
which has led him to disregard any semblance of responsibility or self-control in his life. His desire to do whatever he feels like doing, whenever he feels like doing it, causes him to become a jackass, and I guess more importantly causes his life to be ruined. I guess that segues us nicely into the many lessons Pinocchio teaches us. Since it's based off of a 36-chapter magazine serial that has about one morality tale per chapter, this movie is going to have a lot more lessons than just the one that Snow White had. I mean, you instantly get one during the opening credits. The lyrics to When You Wish Upon a Star tell us that if you wish upon a star, then your heart's desires will become true. Now, initially I was going to take issue with this song as it sounded like a whimsical form of if I want something, then I should have it. I was concerned that it would encourage children to become spoiled delinquents who think they're entitled to anything they desire. Something we saw quite recently with those riots in New York over a PS5. However, the next line stipulates that if your heart is in your dreams, only then will your wish become true. And the meaning of that stipulation becomes clear as the movie takes place. Both Pinocchio and Geppetto have to work to earn their wish of Pinocchio becoming a real boy. They take risks and leaps of faith to accomplish their dreams. The only thing that is explicitly given to them is a chance to make that happen. Through their actions, the overall message of the movie becomes, don't be afraid to dream big, because if you're willing to work for it, it will become reality. But that's not the only lesson Pinocchio seeks to teach us. From the beginning, Pinocchio stresses the importance of education, as all the bad things that happen to the titular puppet are ultimately a result of him skipping school to pursue distractions. Pinocchio's first interaction with Honest John is not only a simple stranger danger lesson, but it also warns its audience about strangers who promise glory and fame. This is built upon with Stromboli, who illustrates the pitfalls of such glory and fame. He also seems to serve as a bit of a meta-commentary on the exploitation of children in the entertainment industry, something that really hasn't gotten that much better in the 83 years since this movie has come out. Then there's the very straightforward don't lie lesson, where the Blue Fairy simply explains how a lie can grow and grow, becoming more blatant and detrimental. On Pleasure Island, there's a few lessons. Lampwick broadly serves as a lesson on peer pressure and warns children to be wise with the company they keep. The island itself is a whole lesson in temptation. In life, we will be offered things that make us feel good in the moment, but eventually they will become detrimental to us. More specifically, it quite blatantly tells kids not to smoke and drink and play pool for whatever reason, because it will turn them into degenerates, or as the movie puts it,
Give a bad boy enough rope and he'll soon make a jackass of himself.
Man, I miss the days when kids' movies had a bit of an edge to them. For many of these lessons to be communicated, Pinocchio makes mistakes and is punished for it. However, the movie ends with him being rewarded for sacrificing himself to save his father. This comes full circle on the Blue Fairy's task to Pinocchio: to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. This all creates a movie with a more down-to-earth working-class worldview. Unlike Snow White and many of the coming Disney projects, Pinocchio starts the movie at the bottom. He's not even alive when the movie starts. Despite being punished over and over again, Pinocchio works to overcome his challenges and earns a better life. This movie is ingrained with values of hard work, delayed gratification, earned success, and redemption, all of which should be ingrained in children so that they can thrive as adults. Pinocchio is a shining example of how to make a good adaptation that makes a lot of changes to the source material. The Adventures of Pinocchio has a much more nihilistic tone than the movie, and it's a lot darker. I mean, the first thing Pinocchio does when he comes to life is get Geppetto arrested for child abuse and smash a talking cricket with a hammer. Yes, Pinocchio kills Jiminy Cricket right at the beginning of the story. I mean, don't worry, he comes back as a ghost and then just is inexplicably alive by the end of it, but he dies. Also, the fox and cat, who in the original story don't actually have names, try to rob Pinocchio while disguised as assassins. But Pinocchio puts his money in his mouth, so the cat and fox freaking hang him. They hang him and plan to leave him like that all night, just for 5 coins. The Disney movie obviously eases up on some of the more brutal aspects of the original story, creating a more encouraging and uplifting movie for children. It encourages hard work and good behavior, teaching children many necessary lessons for their development. While I think the script is a little messy, Pinocchio is a movie that should be part of every family's collection. It's more beneficial than like 90% of the crap that's released for kids today. If you have a dream in life, work hard to achieve it. Don't cheat, don't lie, don't steal to get it, because it probably won't come to you, and if it does, it's going to have some major strings attached. All good things in life require honest, hard work, so go out and achieve your dreams. Thanks for watching. Now, personally, if I was going to do a remake of Pinocchio nowadays, I would do a short animated series that adapts more of the adventures Pinocchio went on in the original magazine serial to incorporate more lessons and more wacky characters, because there was a lot in that magazine serial. But no, Disney didn't want to do that. They decided to make this abomination. I can't wait to tear this to shreds.